Hey everyone and welcome to our P3S guide. Let me start off by saying that this is the first time I'm creating a Savage guide, so if you have any feedback for me, please let me know in the comments. You can see our recommended waymarks in the bottom right corner, so you can just copy those. As usual, the boss will start the fight by casting a raid-wide AoE. In this case it's called Scorched Exaltation. It will happen several times throughout the fight, so just mitigate and heal as necessary. The next mechanic is called Heat of Condemnation, which is this fight's tank buster. Have everyone stacked behind the boss so the tanks can just pick up the tethers and take them outside. Those are AoE tank busters, so make sure not to overlap. The next mechanic is called Experimental Fireplume. Check the animation on the boss for this mechanic, since there will either be a big fireball or several small orbs. The big fireball will snapshot a huge circular AoE on the position of a random player. If you see several small orbs instead, you will spawn circular AoEs traveling around the outside of the arena. Prepare for this mechanic by having everyone stacked behind the boss, including the main tank. As soon as the cast finishes and you see the animation, move towards the north. If you saw the big fireball, continue running to the north until everyone is at least in max melee range. And if you saw the small orbs, stop in the center. You can see how we handled both outcomes in the following animations. In both cases, the boss will follow up by casting either left Cinder Wing or right Cinder Wing, hitting the respective side with a 180-degree cleave. Darkened Fire will spawn 4 black fire adds on either all tanks and healers or all 4 DPS. You need to spread them, otherwise they will explode and wipe your group. To handle this mechanic, pair up every DPS with either a tank or healer and position yourselves on the golden squares near the center of the arena. The black fire adds will remain invulnerable until they have been hit 4 times by the next mechanic, which is called Brightened Fire. Similar to Limit Cut, every player will get a mark above their head from 1 to 8. Marks 1 and 5 will go to Waymark 1, marks 2 and 6 will go to Waymark 2, and so on. You can see the positions on this image. The boss will then fire a circular AoE on each player in sequence. As soon as those fire adds have been hit by 4 AoEs, they become vulnerable and should be killed as soon as possible, otherwise they will explode and wipe your group. If you manage to kill them in time, stack up behind the boss and prepare for another tank buster followed by a raid-wide AoE. Devouring Brand will split the arena into 4 quarters just like in normal mode. He will combine this with another Fireplume, so stack in the center in order to bait. Make sure that the whole group is going to the same safe spot. We always preferred north and west. And then stack for Searing Breeze, which will telegraph an AoE below every player. Dodge those AoEs and prepare for another left or right Cinder Wing and move accordingly. There will be another tank buster, followed by another Fireplume, just bait it in the center as usual. The boss will now become untargetable and reappear on a random side of the arena. There are 2 different patterns for this mechanic, and you can tell which one is going to happen by checking his heads. If you see the middle head glowing, he will dive through the center of the arena. Go to the sides and spread to fixed positions. If you see the 2 outer heads glowing instead, line up in front of the boss with a partner, just like you did for Darkened Fire. The boss will then reappear in the center of the arena but remain untargetable. He will summon 4 small Phoinix adds on the number waymarks. Split into 2 groups, have each tank pick up 2 birds and go to the outer waymarks on the cardinals. Focus the birds one after another and make sure they don't die too close to each other. Once they're dead, gather in the center of the arena for some quick heals since there will be a raid-wide AoE. Immediately afterwards the boss will revive all 4 birds and they will tether to random players. Every player will also be tethered to another player in the party. And the birds will charge their target first and then move on to the other player. And the movement for this mechanic is pretty simple. If you have 2 tethers, move opposite of your bird and clockwise. If you only have 1 tether, move to the bird that your partner is tethered to and counterclockwise. And the players with 2 tethers need to make sure to move after they were charged, so they don't get hit in additional time. You can see the movement for 1 pair on this animation. Once that's done, repeat the process of killing the birds on the cardinals. They are attackable throughout the whole mechanic, so you can kill one of them before the tethers even go off, just like we did here. The boss will then cast Dead Rebirth, which is a huge AoE. Make sure to use mitigation for this. There's gonna be another tank buster, followed by a new mechanic called Fledgling Flight. 4 random players will get a mark above their head with an arrow pointing to a cardinal direction. Since you want to face them outwards, have each player run to the number waymark closest to their cardinal direction. Once their positions are locked in, everyone should move to the center to avoid their conal AoEs. Experimental Gloryplume will combine explosions around the arena with either a stack or spread mechanic. The big dark orb means it will be a stack, and the smaller dark orbs mean it will be a spread. Since the stack marker will always appear on 1 random tank and 1 random healer, you can't have your normal light party spreads here. We had our tanks and melees go north and our healers and ranged go south. The boss will now begin casting Fountain of Fire, which will spawn 2 puddles either north-south or east-west. Have each healer run into one of them and stay there until it disappears. They will appear 4 times in total, so make sure to have the healers take care of all of them or the boss will get buffed. Meanwhile, the boss will also target the 2 closest players with a purple AoE. When they expire, a bird will appear in that position and tether to the player. After a few seconds, the birds will charge, just like before. Since you need to be a certain distance away from your bird to survive it, run through the boss and go next to the other bird there so they don't overlap. This mechanic will repeat 2 more times, targeting the 2 closest players every time. We had tanks go first, melee second, and ranged last. You always want to drop your bird in front of the current healer puddle, just like in this animation. The boss will follow this up with 2 raid-wide AoEs and another tank buster. We have now reached the hardest mechanic of this fight, which is called Firestorms of Asphodelos. 3 fire tornadoes will appear in the arena. Split your party into northern and southern groups again. We use the same groups that we've already used for Gloryplumes, but it would be easier to have tanks and ranged DPS in one group while healers and melees are on the other side. The boss will then follow this up by casting Flames of Asphodelos, which will telegraph several cone AoEs on the floor. They will go off in the order that they appeared in, so stand on either the second or third one that appears and dodge into the first one as soon as it's gone. Simultaneously, the boss will show either a big dark fireball or several smaller dark orbs. The mechanic is the same as before during Gloryplume, so stack with your group if you see the big orb and spread if you see the small orbs. Gather near the center to heal up. The cone mechanic will now repeat, but without the dark orbs afterwards. Instead, the boss will start casting Storms of Asphodelos. 2 Heat of Condemnation tank buster tethers will appear. When the cast goes off, several things will happen at once. The boss will fire a cone AoE towards the 3 closest players. Meanwhile, all 3 fire tornadoes will also fire a cone AoE towards the closest player, while the 2 tank buster AoEs will also go off. There are several ways to resolve this mechanic. I will focus on the one we used, which people usually call the Elmo strat. Many people hate it, but it has worked very well for us. I will also show an alternative way of handling it, but won't go into too much detail about it. We had the whole party stack north for the second Flames of Asphodelos. That way the tanks will have an easier time to take the tethers off people. Once the tethers are on the tanks, both of them will move to the freeway mark. Meanwhile, all other players except one ranged DPS or healer will stay stacked in the northwest. The ranged player that doesn't stack with the group will have the responsibility of baiting the northern tornado. Since the tanks will overlap the tank busters and have 2 cones fired towards them, it is mandatory that they both use the invuls. If everyone is standing correctly, no other cones will overlap and nobody will die. The boss will then cast Darkblaze Twister, turning one of the fire tornadoes dark. Have everyone stacked there to bait the 4 searing breeze puddles one after another. Move together in a clockwise pattern so you end up near the dark tornado again. Pay attention to the boss's experimental Ashplume cast and remember whether you saw a big dark fireball or several smaller dark orbs. There will now be a knockback centered on the dark tornado. Divide into 2 groups again and position yourselves on the golden squares on the arena floor in front of the dark tornado. You will then get knocked back towards the 2 other tornadoes. Stay there for a second since there will be donut AoEs centered around them. And then, depending on what you saw during the Ashplume cast, either stack or spread. The boss will cast another Scorched Exaltation, just heal up and mitigate as usual. The next mechanic is called Death's Toll. It will afflict everyone with a debuff of either 1, 2 or 4 stacks. Spread out a bit for Fledgling Flight and resolve it by pointing the arrows inside the arena, this time opposite of what you did for the first Fledgling Flight. Once their positions are locked in, move to the safe spot. Your safe spot will depend on the amount of debuff stacks you have. If you have 1 stack, move directly behind one of the blackbirds. If you have 2, move to one of the intercardinal golden squares on the floor. If you have 4, stay in the center. Each time you get hit by one of the cone AoEs, you lose 1 stack of your debuff. Your goal is to lose all of your debuffs. When all 4 cone AoEs have resolved, get up and heal to 100% health before the Life's Agony's cast finishes. Astrologians have a very easy time with this mechanic, since they can just use Macrocosmos to immediately heal everyone back to full health. White mages could struggle a bit more, especially since there's a healing reduction debuff on everyone. Afterwards, stack the group in the center again for another experimental Gloryplume. This one will always be a big fireball which you need to bait in the center, followed by either a stack or spread. Move as soon as you see the fireball and check for the stack or spread while you're moving north and south with your groups, and then spread or stack accordingly to resolve the mechanic. The boss will then disappear and dive through the arena again just like before. Stack or spread with your partners depending on what the boss is doing. He will then reappear and repeat Devouring Brand followed by Searing Breeze, just like he did at the start of the fight. Resolve it just like before. All remaining casts will be Scorched Exaltations until he eventually enrages. I hope this guide was helpful. Again, this is the first time I'm doing a Savage guide, so please give me feedback on what to improve and let me know if you even want to see more of them. Thanks for watching and special thanks to our patrons for supporting us, you guys are the best.